All right, we are live.
Yay.
All your lovely skills and set up today. So welcome to the suicide panel that we set up for our students today. So if you're joining us, welcome. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Jessica DeRoche. I am the Senior Director over our Flowermound campus and the Denton Exchange campus, but I'm also a counselor. And then I'm going to have the other panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start with Sherry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sherry McCarthy. I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor. I work at Denton County MHMR in their mobile crisis outreach team, which assesses people that are either suicidal, homicidal, or have significant deterioration in functioning. I'm also a volunteer on the LOST team, which Lori another panelist will talk more about. I've had many years of working or volunteering in the field of suicide prevention. It's a cause close to my heart as I've had personal experiences with the suicide. I'm a suicide attempt survivor of about 40 years, so it's very important to me and glad to be here.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate you sharing. And then Lori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Lori Common. I am the LOST Team Coordinator for Denton County MHMR. LOST Team stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. I am a mental health professional, but I am also a suicide loss survivor. As Sherry said, this is very close. Suicide prevention is very close to her heart. It's also very close to mine. And I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Phyllis, are you there? Here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Well, my name is Phyllis Finley, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator for Denton County MHMR Center. So sorry you guys can't see me. I will try again in a little bit to try to get the video up in just a second. But again, I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for Denton County MHMR Center. I've been with the agency for 27 years as of last month. Have spent pretty much my entire adult career working in mental health. And in my current position, I guess I'll speak to that. What I do now is through a grant. I teach mental health first aid. I market and teach mental health first aid through a Health and Human Services Commission grant, the Texas Schools Initiative grant. So we were able to bring mental health first aid, which is an evidence-based program that pretty much trains individuals and laypersons especially on how to recognize signs and symptoms of mental health and substance use disorders, and also crisis situations, and pretty much how to have difficult conversations with people and how to get them connected to help. That's what the program is all about. And we are able to do that free of charge to school districts, to also charter schools, universities, community colleges, and trade schools in the Denton County area, again, completely free of charge. And so that's what I am doing now. So I've spent my pretty much several years working in the area of suicide prevention, and a lot of mental health first aid addresses exactly that. So I think we're going to have another question that's going to go into a little bit more of what we bring that's unique to the panel. So I'll speak more to that in a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Phyllis. And I've been through the mental health first training, and y'all do a great job. So thank y'all for hosting that for free. And it's a great opportunity for at least counselors for CEUs and then to learn new things as well. So thank y'all for offering that service. And then lastly, we have Whitney. Whitney, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Whitney Mask. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. I'm the Director of Crisis Services and Outreach for Texoma Community Center. So we're the local mental health authority for Grayson, Fannin, and Cook counties over here in North Texas. I'm part of the mobile crisis outreach team. I'm the director of that group, and so I kind of have the responsibility of overseeing our team that goes out, does the assessments. I'm also a mental health first aid instructor as well. So I do the youth mental health first aid. And so that's another part of my role that I do. And I'm kind of the one from our agency that goes to like a lot of community agencies and stakeholders to kind of get the information out about mental health and the resources available, suicide awareness and prevention, that kind of thing. So love it. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate each of you agreeing to be on the panel tonight. And this isn't an easy topic. It just is hard to bring up with people and really discuss. So again, like I said, this is the first time we've ever really done this type of platform and this topic with our students. So this is all new, uncharted territory for us. As far as just experience with suicide and mental health, like I said, I'm a counselor, but my mother was diagnosed when I was really young with mental health issues, and she actually was attempted suicide, and I found her. So, and that was at a very young age. So that kind of shaped my career path and kind of my experiences, and kind of one of the reasons why I went into mental health and to help people as well. So, so I'm a good panelist, at least moderator, to kind of throw that in there. But I understand that it can be difficult on all sides. Not just someone who's attempting, but families and survivors and such. So I'm going to let each of you kind of talk about your experience with suicide prevention. Sherry had mentioned, and Lori both had mentioned their experience as being attempters. Would y'all, either one of you, like to add to that or kind of tell your story? Lori or Sherry, who wants to go? Sherry will go.
Well, I wanted to, and I'm sure Lori will address this, but I believe I'm a suicide attempt survivor, and Lori is a suicide loss survivor.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying that for us.
Yeah, and I know that's confusing to the public. These are newer terms anyway. I agree with you. This is a difficult topic. For those of us that have been in this field for a while, we forget that. We deal with this topic every day, especially those of us on the mobile crisis team or anything like that. So this is almost like talking about the weather for us. Not that we don't take it as a serious issue, but we are kind of desensitized to how difficult it can be to talk about. In fact, that's probably, we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but that's probably the biggest issue, is that people that have not been directly affected by a suicide, number one, they don't know what to say to people that have. And number two, they don't even know if they should bring it up. It's a very uncomfortable topic. And in the last couple of decades, there's been kind of a big surge of let's talk about it. It's okay to say that the more you can talk about it, it reduces the stigma of mental illness. I'm not going to go on, but obviously about 40 years ago, when I was in my 20s, I was a fresh sophomore in college. I was a music major. I taught music and band for a couple of years. That was going to be my career path, but later on, I kind of figured that my attempt while in college led me down a different path, and this is the path I'm supposed to be on. But I was at a very small school in central Indiana, and this was, like I said, 40 years ago. And the night that I attempted and got home from the hospital, the administration called me in the middle of the night and told me, even though I was a straight A student, academic, blah, 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 all that big achievable stuff that many of us perfectionists do, I was told that we don't have this kind of thing here at our campus, and either you see the school psychologist tomorrow or you're expelled.
Wow.
And that just shocks me, because we would not do that to a student today, thank goodness. So that shows how far things have come. I've been on the board of Touched by Suicide for 6 years. I'm not on there now, but it's a local, it's kind of partnered with MHMR in many ways. It's a nonprofit locally here that runs groups for adults, support groups for people that have lost someone to suicide. I also help co-lead a group within MHMR for clients that have attempted suicide. That's a difficult group, but it's a high-risk group. These people have already attempted suicide in the past. And yes, even though I'm all these things, I do have a mental illness. I do have depression. I have not had any episodes of depression in a long time, but because of the nature of my work, I'm very fearful of not staying. I stay on my antidepressant because of that.
Mhm.
Just because you have a mental illness does not mean you can't function, you can't have a professional career, you can't have a good life.
Mhm.
People are, we'll see it again this Halloween with little people, little creatures wrapped up in, cages, insane asylums, and all that old stuff. People with mental illnesses are not dangerous as a whole. They are not crazy. They are not on the streets drooling. The only time I drool is in my sleep when I'm snoring. So, we have to make the world aware that mental illness, and they say that out of the population that has completed suicide, we use the word complete instead of commit because commit indicates a crime. But again, that's just political correctness. But the research says that 90% of the people that complete suicide have a mental illness. For my own personal opinion is 100% of the people that attempt suicide have some form of mental illness. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take up all the time, but I love doing these kinds of things. We've got to make it okay for your everyday person to realize, wow, I have depression, or I have this or that. And I'm not a freak. I'm not an outcast. It's not the end of my life. So,
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. We'll move to
thank
Lori.
you.
So, Lori, your experience is you're an attempted suicide survivor. Was it a family member or somebody else?
I am a suicide loss survivor.
Okay, lost survivor. I will get that right
Loss.
the next time. So I apologize.
No, it just means that I lost someone that I love. Or when we say survivors, when it pertains to suicide, it means someone that has lost someone to suicide.
Okay.
But to clarify it more, I'm a suicide loss survivor. I lost my oldest son, Mason, in March of 2017. So, like Sherry, mental illness, I've been around it for several years. It runs in my family. My mother had mental illness. She was bipolar, and when I was younger, she was in and out of the hospital several times. She attempted suicide, but thankfully did not complete it. I have 4 children. Mason is my second oldest, and he had anxiety, which he was being treated for, but he got too busy working and ran out of his medication and then spiraled from there. I just want to say I agree totally about what Sherry said. That she believes 100% of people have mental illness that complete suicide, because if you really think about it, we are born with an instinct of survival. So someone who takes their own life, they're not thinking correctly. They have a very distorted thinking process, or they would still be here. So, and I believe that's mental illness. I am a coordinator for the Denton County Loss Team, and LOSS stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. And what we do is we go to the scene of suicides. Well, this was before COVID, but now we go after. But we worked with the Denton County medical examiners, and we go to they call us when a scene has been ruled a suicide, and we go and we provide support and resources for those who have just lost someone to suicide. And a lot of people, I've been questioned, well, how do you do this? Isn't this hard? Well, it's extremely hard, but these people are going through the worst time of their lives, the worst moments, the tragic moments of their life. And I just want to be there to offer them some resources and some support, and let them know that they're not alone. Because when people lose someone to suicide, they feel like they're alone because of the stigma. People don't talk about it. No, this doesn't happen in our family, but we let them know that they're not alone, and we try to offer them as much support as possible.
Yeah, that's a great resource. I know growing up, it would have been nice to have that. Being at a young age and finding my mother, I didn't know what was going on, and then she, like your mother, she had been in and out of mental institutions and for many years, and so it would have been nice to have somebody there to explain it to someone that young and to kind of walk and support the family because it was definitely very new for our immediate family, but extended family as well. So thank you. And thank you for providing that service as well. Whitney, do you want to expand a little more on kind of your experience with suicide or suicide prevention?
Yeah, so as the director of crisis, obviously that's what my team, is geared, towards is hopefully preventing suicide. Personally, unfortunately, I've actually lost 9 friends and family to suicide. Most of those
Wow.
in teen, college age years, and so it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's definitely the kind of the fire and passion, that led me to this career, not only as a counselor but specifically working in crisis. And so it's something that has impacted my everyday life. It's something that still kind of gives me the motivation to get up and go to work. Like Sherry was mentioning, it's a really, really hard job working with the mobile crisis outreach team. And so that's kind of the fire and the passion, and also why even teaching mental health first aid and going out in the community just to kind of bring awareness to the help and resources that are out there. It's a big reason why people that do work in this field. Most of the time, individuals that work, within mental health, counseling, crisis, have been impacted some way. And unfortunately, it's something as far as suicide goes that has impacted me multiple times. Growing up in the small town where I grew up, it's something that we've seen several times there, and community resources oftentimes in small towns and rural areas where I lived at in West Texas. It's hard to know what resources are available and where people can go for help, or really even just talking about it. Talking about suicide, talking about mental health in general has been so stigmatized for so long, that now being able to do something like this is just amazing. Being able to have a panel where you have people coming saying, not only do I work in this field, but I've been personally impacted, by this topic. And that's why we're here. So being able to just kind of come out and put this out there for everybody and just say, hey, there's other people out there that, you can talk to, that, will listen. And that can also maybe kind of hopefully help a little bit by sharing their own experiences. So um, it's something that it makes it hard to do the job, being impacted by it personally. But kind of like what Lori was kind of talking about earlier, being able to give that support to a family, that's huge. Being able to hopefully make sure that they're able to continue to be survivors of that loss. And so that's why we're here. That's why we do this. And so I'm very, very thankful for you guys having me. Hopefully, it can kind of expand some more knowledge and information about what is available. So
Definitely. Thank you, Whitney. And then Phyllis, it's your turn. Do you want to add to kind of your story and kind of your kind of experience?
Absolutely. And so I guess we redesigned our crisis services in the late 2000s, and I joined the crisis team, and I worked for the mobile crisis outreach team as their community liaison. And I reached out to school districts, to police forces, and educated them on how to access our team. That was one of my primary roles, and educated them on suicide prevention. We were part of the Zero Suicide in Texas grant that happened in 2014, which we were able to bring a lot of wonderful training to our center for our staff, applied suicide intervention skills training, ASK, which is the Ask About Suicide, Seek More Information, Know Where and When to Refer, CALM training, all these different wonderful trainings. We developed a suicide prevention coalition as a result of that grant. So all these wonderful initiatives that we had, and I was a clinician as well. But I think what impacted me most was in 2015 when my son was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had his first episode. And we've had 3 episodes since his senior year in high school, right as we were developing the LOST team. getting that off the ground. That's when he had his first episode. But his last episode 2 years ago was the most severe, where he actually had a suicide attempt. And so it just completely reignited my passion for the work that we do. And it put a whole different meaning on the professional work that I've done all these different years. And so all these wonderful initiatives and how important they really are to educate the community and let people know, hey, this is okay, and you can recover from this. And he is doing wonderful now. He's working a full-time job. He's been in recovery for nearly 2 years from that episode. It happened in 2018, and living on his own. So he's doing really, really well. And so recovery is possible if you get the help and you take advantage of that help. That's the message I really want to get out there, that, nothing is going to impact you near as much as the personal experience is going to, of course. And so all the work that I have done with families and individuals that have struggled with mental illness and suicide issues, thoughts of suicide, attempts, nothing I think has impacted you more than your own loved ones that are looking you in the face telling you, yeah, this happened a couple of weeks ago. And it just absolutely had it's a completely different ball game. Mm-hmm. And so it's important for people to know, hey, you can recover from this and can get better and live a very productive life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad he's in a good place too. That's awesome. It's very good. Okay, so we're going to move to some questions. And the first question is going to be for Sherry and Whitney. And that is, can both of you share some signs about people who are thinking about suicide? So maybe either their friends or family, coworkers, schoolmates, whoever, if they kind of see these things, maybe there's some questions or stuff that they should ask or be aware of. So who would like to answer that first?
I can start. Some of the things that, we talk about a lot, some of the things that they may say, some of the things they may do, and maybe how they're feeling. So some of the things they may say is maybe mentioning being hopeless, having no reason to live. Some of the moods, if they've been struggling with depression, anxiety, irritability. Even on the flip side of that, if they've been struggling with a lot of these things and then all of a sudden come to a resolution of peace or seem like they're doing really well, that can also be a sign that I think oftentimes you don't really think about. And then even things of if they are, doing any kind of goodbyes, giving away prized possessions, a lot of those kinds of behavior obviously be something, look out for, or accessing means to complete suicide that they probably wouldn't have any need to have access to if that wasn't the case. So oftentimes they're going to be, very subtle signs you may not recognize. And then sometimes they may come right up to you and say, hey, this is what's going on. And so it's hard to tell. But, if you ever kind of have that suspect feeling of, hey, this might be a sign that they may be contemplating suicide, they may be making a plan for suicide, definitely, start talking to that individual, making sure that, they're supported, there's somebody with them, and that you get them the help for sure.
Sherry, do you have anything to add?
I do, of course. I have a whole list here of risks and warning factors that the American Federation of Suicide Prevention puts in a little tiny card that you can carry with you. And everything that, Whitney said are absolute warning signs. I like that she said might, and I like that she said subtle, because people, not all, I have seen this in the crisis, doing mobile crisis. And I'm going to talk personally. When I had thoughts of suicide, which for me, it started around age 7, which we know is not a healthy child when a 7-year-old's thinking about ending their life. And it finally concluded with my attempt in my sophomore year of college. I didn't want anyone to know about my feelings. Number one, inside my head, I thought I was the only one in the world that had feelings like this, because we didn't have any community, teach it in school. People didn't talk about it. There were no public service announcements. There were no forums like this. So I thought, you are really messed up. There's something wrong with you because nobody else talks about this or has thoughts like this. But I was an overachiever. I was one of those, straight A kids, secretary of my class, band awards, blah, 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 super achiever in everything. And if you looked at me from the outside, if you didn't know me well, you would think that would be the last person in the world that would want to kill themselves. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, not always, but sometimes there are no warning signs, except for the person's thoughts within them. And the people that are listening are like, well, how do I help them then? What do I do? How would I even know they're having a problem? Well, those that want some help, or those are that ambivalent, they kind of do want to kill themselves and kind of don't, which is classic with suicidal thinking. Phyllis talked about some of the programs. I love some of there's one, Are You Okay? It's a campaign to just talk to each other. Talk to your friends, talk to your work, and just say, hey, everything okay with you? Or you seem a little off today. Is everything all right? How are you, how's your mood? How are things going? Is there anything I can help you with? And then having those personal one-on-one type conversations. And as the professionals know, it's a myth to if you bring up the topic of suicide, it's a myth that it will encourage the person to kill themselves. Mm-hmm. Talking about if only somebody had grabbed me when I was 7 or 10 and said, hey, little girl, what's wrong? Why are you having these thoughts about ending your life? First of all, I didn't even know that was abnormal, other than, I thought I was the only one. And secondly, if somebody had reached out, maybe it wouldn't have escalated to the point it did. And that's what we all can do. You don't have to be a trained mental health professional to go, hey, are you okay? How's everything going? Especially now in the world of social distancing, we're having more conversations, which I think is wonderful. Ask people in your lives, how's everything going? Any struggles lately? Is there anything I can help you with? Open that door. And if they do bring up the word suicide, there's no need to panic or go, refer to it and not use the actual word suicide. In this profession, we do use the word suicide, or we use the phrase, are you thinking about killing yourself? Boom, there it is, right out there in the open. No shame about it. It is a reality that many, 40,000 people a year kill themselves, something like that. So let's just bring it out in the open and talk. You will not give a person an idea or a motivation to kill themselves by talking about it. Research has proven that over and over. So in addition to the warning signs that Whitney was talking about, making those vague statements like, oh, I won't be needing that anymore. What do you mean you won't be needing it anymore? Oh, I won't, I won't, in a few weeks, I won't need it at all. That's kind of a weird statement. Follow up on that. Are you okay? What's going on? What made you say that? So I could elaborate, but I think you get the idea. Open that door, ask people how they're doing. It's okay to use the word suicide or kill yourself, and give them permission to talk about the thoughts in their head.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for Phyllis and Lori. Are there certain groups more at risk to either complete or attempt suicide?
Yes. And if you don't mind me going, Lori, then I'm going to let you have the floor. Is that okay? I think one of the most important things to understand is that anyone can be at risk. That's the one big takeaway that I hope everyone, there is no one that's exempt from this. It doesn't care how rich or how poor you are. It does not care about any of those things. It doesn't care what race, what sex you are, how young you are. So that's the biggest thing I want to be sure that I get out there, is that anyone can be at risk. There are groups that have that could be more at risk, but that doesn't mean that they're going to die by suicide. But what we do know, and the research indicates, that Caucasian males are at your greatest risk. Our aging population in Texas, our middle-agers in the United States are at more risk. Those with diagnosable mental health concerns, obviously we've talked about that over and over and over again. Females attempt more often, but men die by it more often simply because they usually use more lethal means, firearms, hanging, things like that. And then Lori can definitely speak to survivors of suicide, definitely are at elevated risk. I believe, what is it, 2 to 10 times more likely, Lori? So that's a risk group.
Yes.
Those that identify as GLBTQIA, especially our transgendered community, have an elevated risk. So there's lots of different groups, people that have sustained trauma, veterans. I mean, there's a lot of at-risk groups, but and youth, I believe the newer statistics is the second leading cause of death amongst our youth, 15 to 24, and then I've seen as young as 10 to 35. So, I mean, I've seen different panels of research that support that it's the second leading cause of death of our young people and young adults, both in the United States and in Texas as well. So there's a lot of different groups that anyone can be at risk. And so it's just important to understand that, and everybody comes to that decision for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Very multifaceted. I have yet to meet the person, and that everyone on this panel can say the same thing. I've yet to meet the person who had a singular reason. They usually have a lot going on in their world that brought them to this idea of not wanting to be here. So we're far more complicated than just having an isolated incident that brings you to the point of wanting to no longer be here. Or even children are more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, hopefully, do you have anything else you want to add to that, Lori? I bet you do.
Those who self-harm are more susceptible. Those, and like Phyllis said, those who are suicide loss survivors are more acceptable as suicide, because it's like that. They're 2 to 10 times more, depending on the relationship, because they've experienced sudden violent loss, and it's usually unexpected. And a lot of times there's the stigma and they don't talk about it. They have mixed emotions. They blame themselves. So that can lead to suicide themselves. You said members of the armed forces, people with medical conditions, people with, I read something not too long ago, people in chronic pain. I read something about migraine sufferers, people who have horrible migraine sufferers are at a higher risk, which surprised me. And that's, yeah, but like Phyllis said,
increases risk too. So the more overlays you are, if you have a substance use disorder, a medical issue, and a mental health concern, more overlaid, the more things you have going on, of course, that's going to impact your risk levels too. And I don't know if I mentioned, we talked about Caucasians, also Alaska Natives and Native Americans also are a group that are at higher risk as well when it comes to race.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I just want to say again that suicide does not discriminate, so it can be anyone at any time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think you mentioned it well, that there are a lot of comorbidities. So that, you know, in our term language, there's lots of different things going on typically with somebody who attempts or commits suicide, or attempts, and what's the word you use, Sherry? Not attempt, it's the other, or commit, it's the other one. Complete, yes. So I think, you know, a lot of times it's not just a simple black or white issue. It's a very complicated, and it has different roots, and it's hard to express sometimes, and it's hard to definitely have people understand. And I think that's why having this conversation is so important, because all of us have been impacted at some point by suicide, whether it's a family member, a friend, yourself, whatever. We have that experience, and it's okay to talk about it. And like Sherry said, just because you mention it or say something doesn't mean it's going to happen, or they're going to follow through with that or do anything. So I think y'all definitely bring up really, really good points. As far as just kind of our situation right now and what we've seen in the community, and then even with our students, is obviously mental health, and with COVID and being isolated, it just skyrocketed, right? So if you're a very anxious person, probably went a little through the roof. If you're a very social person, maybe that affected you as well, being so isolated with people. And so, with Phyllis or Whitney, do y'all want to talk about maybe the impact of mental health with COVID and kind of how it's impacted either personally or in your agencies and your communities? What have you seen? Whitney, you want to
Whitney,
go
do
first?
you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I can go first.
Okay.
Definitely for individuals that currently receive some type of mental health service, as kind of being one of those more elevated populations, obviously that could be at risk for suicide. With COVID, I think that overall we've done a really great job of transitioning our services to being virtual. The problem with that is you lose that person to person connection, that a lot of individuals, that do struggle with some type of mental health issue oftentimes may be very isolated already.
Mhm.
And that person that they really depend on as far as for that person to person, connection might be the person that helps them with their mental health, services. And so it's been something that I think has really impacted a lot of our individuals that we see throughout our agency. Individuals just out in the community who may not be in services with us, but maybe have some type of diagnosed, mental health condition, or just maybe one of those elevated risk populations. In general, not being able to be around friends or family, or maybe even partake in some of the things that they do for self care. That's one of the things that we're talking about just yesterday in a meeting was, we really make sure that our teams are participating in whatever self care really kind of gets them through the really tough days. And a lot of those activities aren't available right now. And so, people are trying to redevelop their self care plan. And you can ask Phyllis, that's one of the things we really work on in mental health first aid is have your self care plan already set before you need it, before you kind of have to put it into practice. And so, for a lot of people, especially individuals that are working in this field, or doctors, nurses, first responders, everybody that's kind of been on the front line and still working, grocery store workers, all of those, if you didn't already have a self-care plan, or you had a self-care plan that's been impacted by this, that's also kind of made it more difficult to maintain your mental health. And so I definitely would encourage anybody that's struggling mental health wise, kind of come up with what your self-care plan would be, or tweak it a little bit to make it kind of COVID social distancing friendly if you can. Thankfully, mine's fishing and taking my dogs for a walk. So neither of those activities have really been impacted, but I know a lot of people that have been impacted by that. So um, those are the kind of the things that we've seen, really be impacted is just people not having the access to friends, family, and activities that really kind of keep them going. So, Phyllis, I'll let you take it.
Sure. I remember when all this first started with COVID, and I was like grasping for research articles. I'm like, oh gosh, what are we looking at? What is this going to, what are the professionals saying? So I came across an article from the National Institute for Mental Health that talked about mental health being kind of the second wave, that we're going to have the pandemic. We're probably going to have a few months and probably even longer after the fact. It's going to, we're going to deal with this initial shock of people losing their jobs and losing insurance and all of that. And then people could sustain trauma from this for years to come. So we predicted a second wave of mental health being the next big issue. And I think that we've seen that at our own agency. I know we've seen an uptick. It's like we had kind of a grace period from like March through the very beginning, I think, of May, where we didn't really see an increase, and then it hit. And we started seeing an increase in risk of harm assessments. From what I understand from the management of that program of our MCOT team, they're like, well, I think we've kind of leveled out right now, but we did see an increase, an uptick in people reaching out and being in crisis, or and also needing our services too because they've lost their insurance. So we're probably going to see more people accessing us that had an existing mental health concern, and everything's ramped up. And like Whitney said, a lot of your outlets that people would use for self-care to keep their symptoms at bay, they're not accessible. And so having to rethink all of that. And so I know our clinicians have absolutely risen to the occasion of doing visual sessions and being available to do risk of harm assessments over the phone, but you do lose that personal, contact that we're so used to, and it does make you feel very isolated. And so it's difficult. It's been extremely difficult for me. I don't, mental health issues run rampant in my family, and I don't have a diagnosis, but definitely for me, I can feel the anxiety, the stress, that has impacted me personally. And I know of many other colleagues that I've had express that too. I mean, it's a very difficult situation. I'm an extrovert and I love being around people, and not being able to hug you and having to stay at home and not getting to really see people. That's very, very difficult. So, and so I know I'm not the only one. And so that connectivity as best as we can, using those and educating our clients that may have that, and letting people know, find your different ways that you can connect with others, because we're humans and we need that to stay safe and be well. So that's a huge challenge I think COVID has brought to the table, is trying to find new ways to be connected with each other. That's so, so hard. And so I know that with a lot of people that don't have maybe a diagnosable mental health concern, and to normalize that, you're not in this by yourself. You may not have a long history of mental health concerns, or even have it run in your family, but this is definitely we're all fish out of water with this situation, and it's okay to feel that way. There's no shame in it. It's not that you're not tough. It's not that you're not strong. It's that this is a very difficult, unprecedented situation, and we're all in it together. So it's brought a lot of challenges to the table, for sure.
I think too, what's interesting about the mental health profession is we were able to adjust and kind of step up our game and be like, well, we can't not see people, so we got to figure out what we're going to do. And even myself, I see clients in the evenings typically, and so our agency or our little group are like, we got to go online. What platform can we get a part of where we can start seeing clients virtually and kind of moving that direction? And it's funny. My clients are like, I love this. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad you love it. I miss seeing you though, because there is that connection. And I think when anybody, an individual isolates themselves, when you are connected to somebody, it helps. And so if it's a screen for now, that's great. If eventually we can get back to where we can be in the same room, even better. And I think both of y'all talking about self-care is so important for everybody. It's not just people who have mental health issues or people that are in the field, but anybody dealing, because we are fish out of water. There's no script, there's no book, there's nothing. We're just all kind of dealing with this and working together, which is really, really great that we're talking about the self-care and what you need to do, and kind of, yes, these are all positive things. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and kind of go to Sherry and have you really talk about what would you tell somebody who would who's contemplating suicide. What would you tell them? Either a client or somebody that or just our general audience. What would you tell them?
Well, in a serious vein, I would just say don't, but I'm going to elaborate on that. People that as Lori had mentioned before, it's inherent in us. We're built in to survive. The only organisms that I know of in the world that do not have that survival, I know lemmings. They jump off of cliffs, lemmings. And I think there's an undersea creature that also somehow destroys itself chemically or something like that. But all the rest of the biological organisms, including Homo sapiens, including humans, have a built-in will to survive. It's when someone is not having that thriving, when they're having thoughts of killing themselves, those of us, again, in the field, we've heard things like, well, maybe everybody'd be better off, or they wouldn't have to worry about me anymore, or, well, I'll show them, I'll just take care of that. I'll just exit this world. When you hear those kinds of statements, it's indicating that the person's, not that they're crazy, but they've lost their rational abilities. Their thoughts are no longer based on rational thinking. They're based on emotional thinking. And for those people that get in that dark, dark, dark tunnel of depression, I'm still struggling to find the words to convey this to people that have not experienced it. thankfully or unthankfully, I've experienced it, but I still don't know how to communicate it to others. You get in this dark tunnel where you feel like there is the only thing, the only option is to eliminate yourself. When you meet a person like that, or when you are, have a family member or something, and their thoughts are indicating that more and more, their actions, the way they're thinking, just sitting there and saying, "But we love you. You're wonderful." That doesn't break the walls of that dark, dark tunnel. That dark, dark tunnel is indicating that their thinking is skewed. It's messed up, and it's messed up more than likely due to a mental illness. It's not their fault. I mean, we don't blame people for having diabetes. We don't blame people for having depression. That's just the way it is. It's a true condition. So if you are dealing with someone, if you're associating with someone getting very dark, number one, absolutely talking to them, like we talked before. Hey, you're so down lately, or you're the Prince of Darkness lately. What's going on here? This is not the you I know. And then trying to get them help. I believe at the end of this, we're going to have a bunch of different resources. Every county in Texas has a crisis hotline that's associated with their mental health authority. Denton County has a crisis hotline that, you don't have to be suicidal to call it. You can just be having difficulty. So what if you are associating with someone like that, giving them permission to talk about their feelings, not disputing them. "Oh, you're not awful. We love you." That's sweet, but that doesn't really help the person when they're in that frame of mind. Just saying things like, "I care about you," that helps. That helps a lot. But trying not to get in an argument over their belief system, and then trying to get them linked to some mental health help. The mental health authorities, y'all know more about this. For people, it's generally based on your income. If you don't have an income, you don't pay. Or if you do have an income, you probably don't pay a whole lot anyway. So getting mental health help is possible even without insurance, thankfully. So I would say talk to them, let them know that you care about them, reassure them that you're going to hang with them through thick and thin, because that's what a true friend or a true family member does, and then try and get them connected to some mental health assistance.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. And
You're
kind of
welcome.
piggybacking on that, Lori, from the other side of the coin, your son completed suicide. How did that? I'm going to get that by the end of this, because I'm so used to using that word. So I have to retrain myself. So thank y'all
Me
for
too.
telling me that. So how did your son's death impact you and your family and his friends, or just your whole community?
Well, there's research out there that says when someone dies by suicide that 25 people are affected. For me, I believe it's a lot more than 25 people. When my son died, he was one of 4 children. My children were all in shock and devastated, as well as my husband and I, and his father, his friends. So many people reached out. I didn't know my son. I'll just tell you a little bit about Mason. My son was a very funny, witty person who had a lot of friends, and so many people reached out and told me stories of things that he had done or said that really helped him. Probably 4 days after my son died, I got a message from a young man that grew up down the street from us, and he told me, he said, "Mason saved my life." And I said, "I don't understand." He said, "The day I found out that Mason died," he goes, "I had a gun in my hand. I was thinking about killing myself." And I was shocked. And he said, "But then I heard about Mason." And he goes, "I grew up with all you guys." And he goes, "I can't imagine how you feel. He goes, I just know that Mason's not here and I know how I feel and I don't want other people to feel that way. So he went and got help. My nephew shared that he had never shared that he had suicidal thoughts, and he shared, and he's gotten help since. But suicide affects every part of everybody's life, and someone most likely has been affected by suicide or knows someone who has been affected by suicide. And it's devastating. It's an unexpected, violent death, and people are in denial and they blame themselves. It's just horrible. And that's why the Lost Team does what we do, because we want to help people, and it's post prevention for the next generation.
Mhm. So I know, Whitney, you had mentioned you knew individuals, and Lori, what helped y'all cope with the losses that y'all experienced? What are some things that helped you?
Well, my family, my friends, my coworkers, the Lost Team, counseling, that all helped. I have wonderful coworkers in MHMR, and they all showed me a lot of love, and they circled around me and showed me support. I was given a name by Phyllis Finley of a great counselor. If it's okay, I'll just give her a shout out. Her name's Dr. Susan Adams, and she's wonderful, and she specializes in grief and suicide grief, and she helped me a lot. Touched by Suicide, I went to their support groups, and now I am on the board of Touched by Suicide. They have support groups in Denton County, and actually they're the only support groups of their kind in this area. There's not a lot of suicide loss support groups. It really helps to be in a room full of people that understand what you're feeling, because I used to be able to walk in a room and all I had to do is say my son died by suicide, and people were like very quickly trying to get away from me. And I don't blame them. It's a difficult situation. But when I go to a Touched by Suicide support group, I can talk and people are listening, and I can tell them some of the craziest thoughts in my head that I've felt, because the grief is so complicated, and people are go, oh my gosh, I feel that too. So just having a lot of support and having resources that the Lost Team gave me, having my family and my friends, great counselors, that's what helped me. My heart's still broken. I miss my child every day. But I've been able to survive, and I still find joy in the world. I find joy again in the world, and this is what I want to convey to other survivors, that they can survive this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Whitney, do
Yes.
you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I think Lori touched on a couple of things while she was talking earlier. One of the things was, as far as kind of the things that have helped you cope. She mentioned hearing stories and people sharing memories. Having people that also knew the loved one that you lost kind of come and share stories of funny memories or meaningful things, or saving another life, things like that. Those are things that I think survivors of somebody that they've lost from suicide, those are some of the things that really do make an impact, is knowing that even though their time here with us may not have been as long as we wanted, they still were able to leave a lasting impact on those that knew them. And Lori, I definitely agree with you that the loss of one person by suicide touches a lot more than 25 people, for sure. I know, especially growing up in a very small town that has been impacted by suicide over and over, it's something that I think really kind of brought our town together in an unfortunate way. However, it's been something that has made it to where it's talked about more now. It's kind of opened the door for if you are struggling. I think it's really made it something that's communicated within friend groups more in my hometown. Um, I wish that there were more resources, kind of like Lori was mentioning, more groups for survivors, more groups for individuals who have attempted and are survivors from their attempt. I would love to see more of that in our area because I know that's something that we don't have enough of here or anywhere, but definitely here as well. So that's something that if you can find a group or can find an outlet or a resource, I would highly suggest hanging on to that resource so that you can share it and help expand the use of those things because they're so needed.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Do you know
Jessica,
of any virtual groups? Does anybody know of any virtual groups, support groups?
Touched by Suicide are having virtual groups right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we have them. There's one the first week of the month and one the last week of the month, which I facilitate. It's the last Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. There's one more thing I'd just like to add that's really helped me personally. My son died from mental illness. That's what I believe and that's what I know. And my son wasn't how he died, he was how he lived. And that's what I share with survivors. You remember your person for how they lived, not how they died. And that helped me and continues to help me the most. And I try to help other people with that.
Yeah, that's a great point of view. Thank you. And then Sherry.
Jessica,
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to tag on how, you're talking about how many people are affected by a suicide.
Mhm.
Having been on the crisis team for a school district for 14 years, where they say crisis counselors will be in the building. And especially, I've been to high school, elementary, middle school buildings where a student unfortunately has killed themselves. You have to remember, even if the other students in that building didn't know that person, they now all is that somebody that used to go here is no longer here, and it was intentional versus an accident. That has an impact on children. The bit we always talk about, the empty chair. When you go into a classroom, the day after that person killed themselves, do you leave their desk empty? Do you leave their locker alone? Do you move the seating arrangement? You go to the library or the computer lab and everybody, well, that person no longer is there. This affects the teachers, the custodial staff, the bus drivers, the band directors, the students, the office ladies, the school nurse, the parents of the students. In the field, even if we don't know the person that sadly completed suicide, we feel it. It's like, oh my gosh, you're kidding. We lost another one. It affects us. And so for all these reasons, and also the detachment from COVID, which I agree is going to, I believe that when rent payments are no longer delayed, when eviction notices start happening, unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot more people struggling with mental health issues and despair. I just do. But, if we can all talk about it and not, like Lori said, not memorialize their death, but memorialize their life. The impact is way beyond 25 people. And if we can all connect the dots and start talking out loud instead of clearing a room by mentioning that your son, died from suicide, I think that will help. So if we can say anything to the people listening is start talking about this. You're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. Just about it and asking your friends and family about it.
It's almost like just as mental health has changed the last 40 to 50 years, obviously, even with me just being a counselor in the last, 15 years, it's shifted. It's way more acceptable to talk about it. You see commercials online. Today on the radio, I heard about a mental health awareness something, and I was like, okay, so it's out there, but this is part of that as well. So it's almost our job to continue to communicate and reinforce that it's okay. It impacts a lot of people. Hopefully not everybody everywhere, but it could. And we just need to be aware of that and be able to talk with one another and support one another. For sure. Okay, so we have a question from the audience that we don't see. So that question is, do you think some people might do better with virtual care since they can stay in their safe place while talking to a professional? So who wants to tackle that one? Any hands?
Can I just say, I can see that my youngest goes to counseling, and he actually likes it better doing it like this. It's easier for him, and not, it's more convenient. So I don't know, if you have to drive somewhere, it can be harder. So I think virtual counseling is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. I think too, at least in my own experience with my client base, I see a lot of young adults, and they have just shifted over. Not a problem, zero interruption, want to keep going. I have some older adults, and it's just different. They're not as familiar, they're not as comfortable. So I think maybe generationally, and it just may depend on your savviness with technology and being able to. Utilize that and be comfortable in that forum. But at least from my own experience, I've seen young adults quick to change over. I may never see them again in person in the same room, but I think some of my older clients would come back in the room in a heartbeat and have that moment, have the ambiance, whatever. And so at least that's my experience. Anybody else?
I definitely think it's going to be impacted by the individual. Um, there are going to be some that just really, really love the virtual. It's convenient. I'm not going to lie. If I didn't have to drive to the gym, I'd probably go to the gym more often as well. But I definitely think that we have a lot that have really, really taken to it. Like you mentioned, a lot of the younger population has really taken to it. We have the technology group, but then we also have a lot of the individuals that either don't have access to the ability to do it virtually, because we've seen a lot of that in our area. We have a lot of individuals that the only way we've been able to talk with them is through phone, or like standing in their yard, you know, being having to talk at a distance. And so I definitely just it depends on the individual. We have some that it's really been great for them and great for their services, and then others that we've really unfortunately seen some decompensation or some regression because of the virtual. So
Mm.
I think it just is going to depend on who we're working with.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else want to piggyback on that? Feel like we're good? I feel like Phyllis
agree.
wants to say something, so you just
I
agree?
echo everything.
Okay.
I echo
Um,
everything you're saying. It's just situational depending on the person, and I think this experience has been a game changer, and I think it will definitely alter the way we do business going forward, even after this this pandemic is over.
yeah. I know I did a lot of my CEUs during this time frame, and one of the ones I did or completed was about rural mental health and how it is difficult to do the virtual because of the connectivity and just not having the access available. And so that's something that I think maybe as a group and as individuals, we need to work harder on to make sure that those in rural areas have the resources. I would love for some of Whitney's clients to be able to go to a virtual group that Lori's putting on and having that option just because it's needed across the board, even in our own district for community college, our school, we have 6 different campuses, 3 in Denton County and 3 in 3 other counties, of which are more rural. And so it's a different, even working with our student base, yes, a lot of their needs are the same, but their resources are vastly different. And so we try to work really hard to make those connections in those areas that don't have as many resources for those students. And it's difficult. It just truly, truly is. the ones in Denton County, they're available, but then they don't want to go. And we're like, please go. They're free. Go, go, go. We want you to go. Here's the help. So definitely it can be, we need to do more. Okay, so I don't see any more questions on the chat, but I have one more question for everybody. So what do you feel we can do in our communities to try to help prevent suicide?
I think checking on everybody. I think that that's important is checking in with the people you know, and even your strong friends that you don't think would have. They're the ones that may be at risk because everybody thinks they're strong and they're okay. It's not always evident. And like we said before, anyone can be at risk. And so checking in with everyone that's in your life routinely and taking the time to do that. I think we get caught up in our busy lives and we miss things. It's very easy for us to do that. And so now more than ever before is just checking in with one another and making sure, seeing how people are doing. And you never know when that little quick contact can absolutely be life-saving for someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. Taking advantage of educational opportunities too. There's free mental health first aid out there. We just got a grant from SAMHSA to do mental health first aid in the community. I know the United Way has had a grant to do that as well. We do it for universities and school districts. Take advantage of those opportunities. We have a lot of free programs out there, gatekeeper training, because mental health professionals should not be the only ones that have the market on the knowledge. It's first responders, it's friends, it's family members that are on the front line when this stuff is going on, and they need to be equipped with the correct information on how to help someone, things to say, things that you should avoid saying, and what are those resources out there that I can get them connected to, because you don't know what you don't know. This is never impacted, probably never looked into what the mental health resources are in your community. So, and things like this, taking advantage of these kind of opportunities and just getting the message out there that it is okay to talk about this and we need to talk about this. And I was very encouraged today to see one of the Dallas Cowboys talking about mental health today.
Yes.
News. Those, and thank goodness, that this is not something to be embarrassed or ashamed of and to keep close to the chest. We can talk about this just like we can talk about diabetes and heart issues. It's the same. It's a medical condition just like anything else, and we need to get that message out there that it's a part of our world, suicide and mental health, and that we need to get people connected to what they need so they can continue to move forward. So that's my 2 cents. I'll let somebody else talk now.
Well, and Phyllis, like what you were talking about of not even just talking about it, but also whenever somebody does talk about it, not completely just, putting it to the side as if it's not a real thing.
Mhm.
It's easy to see that somebody broke their arm because they have a cast on, or that somebody's going through some type of treatment, chemo, things like that. You can physically see it. And sometimes with mental health, you do have some, physical symptoms that you can see, but oftentimes the symptoms are, they're sleeping or they're withdrawn or they're isolating. And we don't often recognize those as real symptoms or, things that people just think that you can get past them or just move on from them. And so not even just talking about mental health, but whenever somebody is talking about mental health, not just completely disregarding it, because I think that's also been part of the problem that we've seen. There is more information out there about it, but people just want to just pretend as though it's not an actual real, condition, a real issue. And so kind of giving the credit to the fact that, hey, it is a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate medical condition. It's not just a random made up thing in somebody's head. So I think that's kind of my other big point to that. I think Phyllis hit a lot of the other notes on it, but just kind of expanding on that is don't completely discount it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And I think sometimes people do discount it, or, they're afraid to go up to someone that lost someone to suicide because they'll go, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Well, guess what, folks? That's what you say. You go up to your friend, your loved one, your person at your office and say, I'm here for you. I don't really know what to say to you right now, but I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to not know what to say. You're not going to make major blunders if you just show genuine caring for someone.
Mm-hmm.
Running away and not talking to them at the office and just pretending like, whoa, the funeral was over the weekend and back to normal, and kind of addressing the fact that a coworker lost someone, that than just saying, hey, I've never had to handle this before, but I'm so sorry for what happened, and I don't know what to say to you, but I am here
Yeah, it's okay not to have the right
to
response
listen.
because it's difficult for sure.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid of that.
Mm-hmm. Lori, do you have anything to add?
I just agree with Sherry. Just, just let people know you're there. I had a coworker, a gentleman, and he really didn't know what to say. And he saw I was struggling. He just came up to me and he goes, "You want to walk outside?" And we walked outside and he just sat out there with me. He didn't say anything. And then when he sensed that I was ready to go back in, we went back in, and that helped me so much, just him being there. So just being there for people is very important.
Yeah. Well, ladies, I got a comment from Elizabeth saying that there's lots of people thanking us for sharing all the stories and all the information. So I'm very excited that we were able to get together and address this. And hopefully, this will not be the last time. It's just the first time that we do this. And like our students, we're a 2-year community college. Our students are always changing in and out. And so, hopefully, our approach this year is we really want to be more mindful of kind of the content and the topics that we bring to students. And this was just kind of one of the kickoffs. So we may reach back out to each of you for other things, mental health training, all kinds of stuff, because it all ties together, and I think it's nice to hear the stories because you can relate and understand, and then to know the resources, but to know it's okay to talk about it. It's not gonna be the end of the world. We can discuss it. We can support each other, like y'all have been saying. We can find self-care in order to take care of ourselves as well during this time. But I truly thank y'all for participating in the first one of these. We're really thankful for that. If you're watching this, I know Elizabeth is going to put some resources in the comment section. But just, there's the suicide prevention lifeline. So that telephone number's there. There's, if you want to text, where to text to talk to somebody live as well. There's the Trevor Project and the LGBTQ crisis hotline for those individuals. There's a disaster helpline, and then definitely the Veterans Crisis Line as well. So all those information are going to be, and those are more national. If you go to the NCTC awareness and prevention page, we have tons of resources for each of our service areas of just different things: suicide, mental health, depression, anxiety, anything you can possibly think of. Over the summer, we were like, let's put everything online so it's quick and easy for students to go get, and we can refer them and definitely connect them to those resources. Ladies, do y'all have any other resources that you would recommend?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm on the board for Texas NAMI, and that is an excellent resource. Find NAMI meetings all over. So if you live in the North Texas area or going to North Texas, they're doing meetings right now. If you go to NAMINorthTexas.org, you can find meetings for individuals who may have a mental health concern, and also for family members too, and that's important. So definitely take advantage of that. And then Lost Team, I'm sure Lori can, that's a 24-hour operation. And so if it's been 20 years ago and you moved into Denton County and you never got support for that loss, then you can get support from the Lost Team. It's not just an on-scene or immediate response right after something happens. We're here for the duration. Someone has a loss like that, for people to heal from that experience. So those are some very important resources I want to be sure to share. I'm sure you've got the local authorities, Whitney's and ours, and those are 24-hour hotlines that will be shared. So
Good.
Definitely take advantage. Reach out. If you're not doing it today, or you know someone who's not, reach out, please.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to add resources? Final thoughts? What do you think about this? Good?
Oh, I'm so glad you had it. The more we can talk information like this, it's so wonderful to hear that there were many thank yous, so that's good. Keep doing what you're doing, NCTC. I think these forums are an excellent idea on a variety of issues. I think it's great, and I'm so thankful that you invited us tonight to, especially on World Suicide Prevention Day. It's very appropriate to have this forum tonight. Thank you for the information you're sharing with the public.
Well, I think, again, each of you for participating. It's been awesome to hear and just learn, even for myself, terminology like don't say this, say this. And so that, just knowing that and learning that and then hearing each of your stories, I really, really appreciate it. So thank y'all.
I will also share. Oh, I'm sorry. On our website, so we have Suicide Prevention Month this month, and also Alcohol Prevention and Awareness Month, and we do have some more events coming up this month. Those are on our virtual events calendar on our website at nctc.edu. So, I suggest you check out some of those other events too. We have another panel coming up later this month, and so check out some of those activities as well.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Can we plug the Race for Hope and our Music Fest and Art Auction too?
Yeah, good. Definitely.
Help on that?
On September 26th, we're hosting a 5K virtual Race for Hope and live art auction, which is virtual. We usually have a Race for Hope every year, but this year it's going to be a little different. It's all virtual, and if you'd like to register, please go to MHMR's website or the Lost Team's Facebook, and there's registration details on there and a lot more information.
Awesome, thank you.
Got it.
Well, very good. Again, thank y'all, ladies. We really appreciate it, and good luck with your virtual race and art auction. That sounds exciting. Sometimes when I think of virtual race, I think I'm just running in place. But hopefully they're logging their steps. So
well, you can do whatever you want. You can skip, you can do whatever you want in our 5K.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.